Prominent Atlanta attorney Tex McIver is accused of intentionally killing his wife Diane in September of 2016 while they were riding home through Midtown Atlanta. McIver claims he fell asleep in the back seat when a loaded gun in his lap accidentally went off, striking his wife, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. Danny Jo Carter, Diane McIver's best friend of 40 years, was driving the SUV that night. She drove the couple to Emory Hospital, where Diane died the next day. In December, about 3 months after the shooting, Fulton County issues a warrant for McIver's arrest. The charges include felony involuntary manslaughter. McIver turned himself in later that night, but was free on bond just 2 days later. Things change on April 14, 2017, when police find a gun in McIver's Buckhead apartment, a violation of the terms of his bond. Later that month, McIver is indicted on new upgraded charges, including malice murder, felony murder, and witness tampering involving Danny Jo Carter, the woman who was driving the SUV. Judge Robert McBurney is presiding over the case in Fulton County Superior Court. He denied bond to McIver once the murder charge was announced, but a few months later, in October of 2017, set bond at $750,000.
There's really one thing that you need to know about Tex McIver and Diane McIver to know that he did not intentionally shoot his wife, and that is that he loved her.
On Diane's death, he went from negative $5,000 to over $1.1 million cash instantly. And he was the executor and one of the beneficiaries of Diane's $7 million estate. It was aimed right at her back.
He's falling asleep. When I get back in my car, the gun just discharges and goes off.
And she's driving as fast as she could. And she says the defendant tells her, slow down. You can get this case dismissed. And if you do, there's a large bonus in it for you. And I won't mind if you share it with the DA.
You said she made loans to the defendant, Mr.
Yes.
McIver. And did she expect Mr. McIver to pay her on time with interest?
His loan was interest only, so he only paid interest.
Okay.
He didn't pay any principal.
Now, you said his loan. Tell the jury a little bit about his loan and what the loan was for.
The loan was for $350,000. I'm not sure what the loan was, what the money was given to him for. It started January 15th of 2012, and he made interest-only payments. It was a 3-year term originally, and the payments were $1,531 a month. And at the end of the 3 years, Diane came to me, it was January, I guess, of 15, to say, I've re-upped the loan for another 3 years, and I've reduced his payment to $1,400 and something dollars. It wouldn't be in the checkbook registers. It was a whole, I had a file for each person that had a loan out, and each month it had the amount of the payment, and then I posted the payments as they were being made.
Okay.
So there is a spreadsheet for that someplace.
The loan was for $350K?
Yes.
And it was how many years?
The original was 3.
Okay. And that started when?
January 15th. The payment was due on the 18th of the month, and it started in January. I think it was 2012.
And it was 3 years from there.
Yeah, and it was $1,500 and some change a month. My partner is interior designer, and the condo, the second condo, when they put them together, the kitchen was torn out. It was just a big party room with a bedroom. And Tex had asked us what we thought it would cost to put that condo back as a condo, if he wanted to put them on the market.
When you say put that back, you split them back up into 2 condos.
Right, and you'd have to put the kitchen back in, and put it back together.
And sell them separately.
Yes.
And this was less than 24 hours after Ms. McIver.
It was either I went Monday night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night. It was one of those 3 nights.
That sounds like a funny question. Take a minute.
Do you need a break, Mr. Brown?
I'll be all right. Just give me a minute. It's what my job was. And that's how I saw it. It was very important to me to finish. I'm sorry.
Just take a minute, take a deep breath.
I didn't think it would be this hard. It's been too long. Okay. So that's why. It was important to me to finish her life.
Because her money was so important for him.
It was important to
I'm
her.
sorry, objection.
Stop doing that. Don't argue through your questions. Save that for, if you want to give closing, negotiate with Mr. Ruther and Ms. Conklin.
Did he, after showing him your documents, your spreadsheets, did he say anything about her finances?
Well, he thought she had more money than what she had. He was surprised at the number that was in her checking accounts.
Show me a couple that's been together for more than a week. I'll show you a couple that's had an argument.
Tex. Now this is important. The night that he shot and killed his wife, Tex did not want Danny Joe in that car. Will prosecutors argue that what happened that night was Plan B?
I think so. I think you may do that. It's a very easy way to look at it.
Could be their argument, but it doesn't make sense. People want to be together. Maybe they wanted to make up.
Just days after the shooting, Tex is already talking about selling the condo. Is Tex obsessed with money?
He may be obsessed with what he has to do with the money that he hopes he will get.
I think that's the motive for this whole entire case. Yes, he's obsessed with money, and he doesn't have enough, and so what does he have to do? He has to get money, and how does he get it? Kills Diane.
Speaking of money, Tex owed Diane $350,000 from that loan, never paid it off. Is that the motive?
No, it is not. He had to pay interest. He paid interest. She forgave the rest of it in effect.
Yeah, I don't think of that as much as a motive. I mean, here's the deal. If you give money to a family member, don't expect to get it back.
That's true. That is extremely true. All right. We saw this. Tex was surprised after she's dead, after he shoots and kills her. Tex was surprised there was only about $400,000 in her accounts. Is Tex being surprised surprising?
Nothing surprises me. The fact that she may or may not have had as much as he thought, so what? It's a lot of bucks.
Well, it happens a lot of times. People go and rob people, and they think they have more money than what they have, and they don't.
The sign outside the ranch, you saw it. Picture of a gun. We don't dial 911. Which is worse for the defendant? That sign or his first name, Tex?
Hey, his first name could be Rambo. Tex is worse.
I mean, both of them are great. It's like writing a screenplay. You couldn't write anything better than this. But don't dial 911 on your ranch. Not good. But Tex makes me think of a cowboy.
Especially when he didn't dial 911, right?
Well, he could have pressed 911.
Yeah. All right. This one is absolutely amazes me. And this is something that did not happen, and we didn't know about until like a week ago, when the personal assistant said this to prosecutors today, told the jury. A week before Diane's memorial, Tex is saying that he wants to get back with Janie Calhoun.
74 years old, scared to death, doesn't want to live the rest of his life by himself. Doesn't surprise
But
me.
here's the problem with this. It's a great piece of information, but the question is, why are we just getting the information? As a prosecutor, you got to be careful about how you use that.
All right, that was my big headline. Let's do this. I'm going to hand these out. I want to get your take on everything that happened today, all the witnesses, the arguments that were made. Who had the better day today, prosecution or defense? LaTonya.
Prosecution all day long, because they keep getting their story out there about the money, the need for the money, the fact that Tex, whether or not the defense wants you to know it or not, is angry. So I think all of those things together, prosecution is doing a great job of building their case and building motive.
Darryl, prosecution or defense?
Defense, because the defense did not have to cross-examine the witnesses to realize so many of them were not credible. And quite frankly, the state has started their case with a dud, not a bang.
All right, let's go through this now. There was testimony today, and it seemed like a couple things were going on. Tex stormed, I'll take those from you. Tex stormed into the office shortly before, a few days before he shot and killed her, stormed into the office, red-faced, stern. Something happened there. Around the same time, Diane's paralegal noticed that she was distraught as well. Do we think there was trouble in paradise here?
I think there's always trouble. I mentioned it earlier. If you are a couple, you've been together for more than a week, you're going to have problems. Now you start multiplying that when there's a lot of money, which doesn't bring happiness, it brings more decisions and more problems.
But let me ask you this, though. How does this play in front of the jury? Because that's the most important thing, right? The jury is hearing this. Are they going to make this, will this be significant for them? The fact that, hey, there was something going on here.
I think it's something going on. It gives you more emotion about Tex, especially in contrast to what you're seeing inside of the courtroom. And then just using the name Tex, it makes me think, is he a hothead? Does he get angry about things? And you've got somebody who shouldn't have any type of interest in this case, who's telling you what she observed.
You've heard me say it before, you hear it again. Likability and vulnerability. If the jury will see Tex as a good guy, he's going to be acquitted. If he looks like the guy that he has been since the time he was arrested for involuntary manslaughter until the time he was rearrested, they're going to convict him.
Because there's a lot of problems here, right? You've got, let's put them all together, right? He's eyeing up Diane's friend and neighbor, right? Janie. He's eyeing her up a week before the memorial, before he's even picked up his dead wife's ashes, the wife that he killed. I mean, that's a fact. He killed her, and a week before her memorial, he's already talking about going after her friend.
Right, and exactly.
How can a jury like that guy?
And here's the deal. It's kind of like what Darryl was saying. Darryl, you might need to be on the defense team. You might need to go out there and call Bruce and everything. Here's what's going to need to happen. At this point in time, there's no vulnerability that we've seen of Tex. We've seen him cry in court, but it's not necessarily that you feel that he's crying for Diane. Maybe he's just crying about his own personal situation. But you haven't seen anything that makes you feel sympathetic towards him. And the defense is going to have a really hard time. Hopefully, when they get ready to present their case, they concentrate on the vulnerability of Tex.
Got to make him a person. Good people make mistakes, make bad decisions. Bad people make good decisions. Tex has made bad decision after bad decision until the trial. Got to make him a human being with frailties, not an arrogant, condescending person.
And narcissistic. It seems on some levels he's all about himself, and we have not seen anything about a caring Tex.
You know, it's interesting, Vicky, and this is picking up on what I think is really the headline of the day, the fact that he's eyeing up the neighbor. She was married, and the way the comment goes is, hey, I think she's having problems with her husband. Maybe I can get back with her, because he dated her before he married Diane. But Vicky's asking, and this isn't the first person who's asked me this, does the friend have money? Like, is Tex at this point, as he's burying Diane, looking for another sugar mama?
Doesn't matter, because now that Diane is dead, if everything goes according to plan, he has money. So look, again, he's looking for someone to be with. He's not a good guy. That doesn't make
Is
him
that-
a
But
murderer.
What's
is
the
there ever
other-
enough money?
Yeah.
That becomes coming with the question too. Is there ever enough money for him? So maybe he is eyeing her for another purpose. He reminds
What's
me of
the-
JR from
Yeah.
Dallas.
Dallas,
You remember
yep,
Dallas?
yep.
That's what he kind of reminds me of. Arrogant and thinks that he can get his way, and he can get his way out of everything.
Now, I understand people can move on, right? But I don't think a jury's going to like a guy that's moving on, who has not picked up the ashes of his wife,
And won't pay for the ashes.
won't pay for the ashes, is eyeing up her good friend,
Willing to sell her stuff.
and sold her all her jewels and everything else. And by the way, she's also married, and he's already moving in with her. And this is so quick. I know people mourn differently, et cetera, but my goodness, before the memorial?
Look, some of what we heard today were facts. Some of it was the opinion of the witnesses. I'm going to be very interested to see how the defense handles all of that, whether or not, in their opinion, or whether or not Tex testifies or other people testify on his behalf that he is not such a bad guy.
How do you change the fact that he wouldn't pay for her ashes?
Doesn't bother me.
It
It's
doesn't
her ashes.
It doesn't bother you.
It's her
You know
ashes,
what?
Latonia.
You
It's
know
not
what?
her.
You know what? But guess what? You said vulnerability. And guess what? I don't feel any vulnerability that this man ever cared for his wife. He doesn't want to pay for her ashes. He's willing to sell off her belongings. A lot of people keep things of their loved one. I mean, the person just died. And I still go back to this, and I bet you anything. The fact that she did not want to see him when she was in the hospital, I know you don't think that's a big deal, but I think that's a huge deal. Because here's the deal. Even if she thought, supposedly you said that she said accident, but most of the time, if you think you're about ready to die, and when you want to give somebody forgiveness, when you want them to feel better about what happened, if you truly believe what happened was an accident, you're dying, and this is your mate. And you don't want to see him?
I want to check. I had a couple notes there. People couldn't hear us. I just want to make sure that you all can. If you can hear us, just put a note that yes, we hear you. I just want to confirm that, and we'll continue. But we'll continue even before that. What do you think about the loan, the $350,000 loan? Right? Tex borrows the money from her, never pays it back.
So what?
He's got no money. He's got $5,000 in his account. The day after he kills her, he's got $1.1 million.
So what? He borrowed the money. She allowed him to pay interest only. She reformulated the loan and allowed him to pay less. She obviously was not looking to be paid back. As Latonia said, if a family
Is he
member
emasculated,
borrows-
you think? Is there a chance here that he's emasculated, that he now has no more money, he's got to live off of her, and he doesn't like that?
Possible.
Well, I don't know if he doesn't like it because he did it for
He did,
quite a
well,
quite a
he
bit of
did it for a
time.
while, but he was at the point where he was going, and we saw this testimony the first day, where he was making like over $600,000 as an equity partner. Then he's under $300,000, and we know what law firms do. They push you out at a certain point. You're not making enough rain. You're not making enough money for us. They start to push him out. But he continued to live that lifestyle. They love to entertain people, throw extravagant parties, take extravagant trips. Do you think that could be part of the mentality of Tex? I'm used to being this big time attorney, and now I'm at the end of the road, and
he's-
she's got to take care of me.
I
He's
think it's-
spending her money. He's also spending their money. There's a
But
part
they're
of it.
separate accounts. They're very particular about that.
I get that, but they're not living separately. They're living together. They're going on trips together. So the fact that he's spending her
But
money.
Yeah,
the
but what
personal
if he
citizen
wants
said
to-
they paid separately
So what?
on the trips as well. Like if it was a trip she was paying for, she would pay for it, and he would make all the arrangements. Sometimes he paid for it, but I think most of the time she paid for the trips.
So you're going to have to go under the theory that, yes, they were together, but at some point he wants to not be together, but still have the money. How can he do that? So you're going to have
There's
to
only one way.
There's only one way. You've got to get rid of her to be able to have her money and spend it whichever way you want to, and maybe be with someone else. And I'm not saying,
Daryl's not buying it.
I'm not saying, Daryl, that that's
I'm not even
truly the
leasing
case.
it.
But you're not even leasing it. Well, guess what? There's somebody who's leasing it. He's being charged with this type of thing. And so I think that you've got to look at these things, and that's what the prosecution's looking at. These are all possibilities, and it's not one thing. That's what's making this case. And as we listen to it, it's all these things together that start building up. So that when you first hear about the case, it's like the hot car case. When you first hear about it, you have these emotions, and you think, oh no, there's no way a father could have done this. When you first hear about this, you're like, oh, maybe it was an accident. But then you hear he's given 6 different versions about how it happened. You hear about he doesn't want to pay for the ashes. He's a person from
Yeah, not
Atlanta.
paying for the ashes.
That
That's
is just cold.
That's
I'm
cold,
sorry,
but it's
and I
also
know-
cheap. Doesn't that give us an insight into how important money is to this man?
Money.
Doesn't bother me that he didn't pay for the ashes. Maybe I'm cold, but had it been her body and it was to be
There are
buried, I
people
completely
who-
believe that. But
there-
on the other hand, the fact that he didn't pay for her ashes, it doesn't bother me. Maybe he was going to pay for it later. He needed money at the time. He sold off a lot of things so he could continue to
He
live.
didn't sell any of his guns.
Well, why would he? They're not worth as much immediately.
$1,600. $1,600 is about $1,600, a little under $2,000, and you can pay for your wife to have a proper burial, or in a sense, or cremation. You can pay for that.
She was cremated already. It was her ashes. It could have been a dog's ashes when he got it back. It would have taken DNA to
I'm
make
sorry.
that decision.
I bet you anything, if you speak with a juror, these are going to be some of the things, whenever they make their decision, that they're going to have thought about.
Absolutely.
Cindy and LeClaire are referring to him as greedy, green-eyed, greedy monster. Are his eyes green? Yeah, they are green. Green-eyed, greedy monster. And if that's the way he comes across, that's bad news, because that goes to your whole theory here, that they've got to like him to some extent. So have we seen anything yet that would give the jury a reason to like Tex McIver?
No, we
Not
have
at all.
not. No.
Not at all.
Does that put the pressure on the defense that he's got to get up there and be likable?
But here's the deal. I don't know if he can get on the stand and be likable. But here's what you do. You get other people out there.
Like who? His children? No, they're not testifying for him.
But you get friends and people out there who are going to testify about their relationship with Tex.
That's interesting because a lot of their friends, you know, they were sort of shared friends, I guess. And
But here's
I don't-
some of your lawyer
how about this?
friends.
One of his best friends is the sheriff of Putnam County.
Right?
Do you think he comes in to testify on behalf of Tex?
I don't know. We'll
If he
see.
does, very powerful. If he does, I really think about doing that.
So much of
Really?
it depends on what happens. Again, you have to show that he's a frail guy that's getting older and almost old. That's what the defense has to portray him. And his body language, his facial expressions, everything, the way he wears his hair. They really need, I've said this before, a makeup artist and a stylist. They need to style him old and frail, not tough and arrogant.
And also when you watch him, if you watch some of the live streaming that we've had here on 11/11, and you watch him and the interactions inside of the courtroom, he doesn't give you frail. When I look at what happened with Bill Cosby, right? You think of Bill Cosby, you hear about all these things that he's done, but then here he is being led into the courtroom and he looks like he's an old man.
Yep.
Is this old man the same man who was who was drugging everybody? I don't get that meeting from Tex.
I don't get that from Tex either. If he's-
I get cold, I get arrogant, and I don't get those types of things. And then when I hear this, all you care about is money.
Money. And
you don't care about the ashes. You don't
Nope.
care about anything.
Money is such a big part of this. And today we got an interesting take on money and how important it was to Diane. The personal assistant testified she's a strong businesswoman, she's a very strong personality, but she was very concerned about money. And one of her biggest fears was to not have enough money to live on. She's an incredibly successful woman, self-made woman, unbelievable career that she forged for herself. But money was important to her. She had a personal assistant who had access to everything, but she paid every bill. She wanted to know where every dime was going. She wasn't cheap, but she valued money and she kept on top of it. Do you think maybe that could be the cause of the friction that was going on, that maybe she felt he was mooching a little too much off of her?
I don't think there was one, if there was friction, I don't believe there was one thing that was a friction. I think it was a combination.
You don't
of
think he
things.
stormed into that office for one reason, that there was something that happened?
Sure, something happened. Maybe she called up. Maybe he wanted to go on a trip. Maybe they were supposed to go to a movie. Maybe they were supposed to have dinner. There are all these conjectures.
Are you saying you don't want me to speculate? He doesn't want me to speculate? Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
I don't want
well,
you to have closing argument absent the
but
evidence.
don't you think the
or lack
jury,
thereof.
the jury tonight has
jury
got to be
is.
wondering
They're
what was that
thinking.
meeting about? And we will find out, because I think her old boss Corey is gonna testify at some point about what's happening. We haven't heard from him. We haven't heard from Danny Joe. We've got some big witnesses still to come
we
up
do.
here.
We definitely do. But I do think the defense has a really big job here. They've got to humanize Tex, and right now, he's not.
Not human. All right, let's see. You got
We
any
didn't
more
say
questions?
he wasn't human. We said he's not humanized.
And this is interesting. Wait, I'm trying to find it. Here we go. And Muriel says, but don't we all worry about having enough money to live on? This is not a bad thing.
I don't think that's as big of a deal because, to be honest, if you speak to people who have tons of money, that's one of those things. I don't know why, but they...
Well, she's a self-made woman, so she
Right,
came from
right,
nothing and
so
then had a lot.
Right, and so she also has control. She probably was kind of a type A type of person. It seems kind of like that. So I don't think that is as big of a deal, but it may cause some resentment in this man, Tex, that he's having to always go to her to get money. And she's got the control of the money. And I do find it interesting with the amounts of money that she has in comparison to him, that they're tracking who's paying for what on a trip.
Totally separate. Now, they're married, and this isn't like a new
But
marriage.
it could be a tax thing, but I don't know.
They met in 2000, married in 2005, so you're talking about 12 years of marriage or 11 years of marriage, and still separate accounts. She didn't have children, so it's not like she's protecting anything.
You know, here's the deal too, though. But they met later in life, and so some bit of independence there. I can see that. That's not that.
They don't want to give it up. Do you think it's a
Yeah.
big deal, the separate bank accounts?
I
Because
think
I think
it's-
that the friction, I think it's going to be all about money.
I think it's abnormally normal. Every family, every husband and wife does things differently, and maybe they were just tallying it up to say, in the end, whenever the end comes, for one or both of us, common calamity, whatever it may be, then the estates will be able to tally it. I don't know. We're speculating, and until we hear all of the evidence, and by the way, I think the state, as I've said before, is not starting with a bang, but they're piecing this together piece by piece, and so far, I haven't seen a piece that I buy.
I buy it. Now, mind you, I am a prosecutor currently, but I buy it. I really do. I can believe that this is not an accident. I can start believing that this is a possibility, that this was a part of some type of nefarious plan.
Well, let's talk about one other thing, talk about plans. It came out today that Tex McIver was asking his ranch hand, who didn't live on the ranch but lived up in Athens, if he could drive Danny Joe home the night of the shooting. She ends up being the driver in the SUV. He says, no, we live in Athens, we're not going to Atlanta. But Tex did not want Danny Joe inside the car. So is that bad for prosecutors or good for prosecutors?
The word neither comes to mind, because if Tex was there with his wife, by just the two of them, what was he going to do? Shoot her in the head, shoot her in the stomach, shoot her in the back? No. So that
There
would
might have
not
been another
worked.
accident, different type of accident,
it
without a
might have-
witness.
It might have been
Throw
an
out the
easier.
window?
It's an easier case always if you don't have a witness.
I disagree.
I think it's an
Sometimes a
easier
witness
case.
makes it easier the other way.
Do you think it's easier right now with this witness?
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's there. She heard his wife say, "I love you. It was an accident." And that's a great witness. Wife testified even after she died.
She also didn't want to see him in the hospital.
So what? She was
But
looking
you
bad,
can't,
feeling bad.
you can't go and isolate one thing and not look at the other thing. And here, what about this, Darryl? This is the part that I find that what the prosecution got out that I think is interesting. He gave 6 different accounts as to how she got shot.
Doesn't bother me. He's a guy that's
It doesn't bother
scared-
you that
no.
he said that the gun's behind her back and
No,
he has
nothing
do
bothers me,
that?
and it doesn't bother me because he was scared to death. She died. He was afraid that he was going to be arrested for and perhaps tried for and possibly convicted of murder. It doesn't bother me because he's like a drowning rat that doesn't know what to do, and he's striking out
Well,
everywhere he can.
He seems to know what to do. He knows how to sell her stuff and try to put the condo up for sale. He knows how to not spend the money on her ashes. So he seems to be kind of concerned. Here's the deal. I don't think it's just, the prosecution can't say this is just about money. because he could have kept going on with this whole money situation, but he needed the money without her. Is it that he wanted the money without her because he wanted somebody else and the money?
Well, it seems like he was ready, willing, and able with Janie Calhoun, the neighbor. Hey, one other thing I want to bring up, on the way back on that drive, they stopped at Longhorn, and the waiter testified today, bottle of wine, which he remembered because it's very unusual for anyone to order a bottle of wine at Longhorn Steakhouse to begin with, but they drank a bottle of wine. What, if anything, does that mean to this case?
It means that if they did a blood alcohol on him and he was inebriated, somewhat inebriated, or not at all, if they did a blood alcohol on Diane and she was inebriated, that could make a difference. Otherwise, buying a bottle of wine means nothing. I can buy it, as I've done before. I don't even take a sip. Other people at the table drink it.
I'm not quite sure what it would mean about the fact that Diana being possibly inebriated would mean anything. She's just sitting in the car.
No, I agree with that,
Yeah.
but my point is, the bottle of wine to me means nothing. What means something to me, both as a prosecutor it should, and as a defense lawyer it does, is that firing through, whether by accident or design, firing through that particular seat doesn't guarantee that the bullet's going to go where it's pointed. We all know that seats have, there's metal in those seats, it
I would
could have
agree
been
with
diverted,
that.
and so that throws everything off from the prosecution's case. There was a deliberate murder. One bullet was fired.
All right, Muriel says if it was just the two of them in the car,